All right, so in this lecture, it's all about the rating scale, which is going to help you write the ecers paper. So I'm just going to go over what the rating scale is again, although I did that last week. I'm going to do an overview of the subscale, the indicators, and some of the items. I'm going to show you ways to score, give you a little bit of resources, and then I will give you instructions for the paper as well. There will also be resources online in a discussion board, and I'll also have a PDF online to support you as well. And then the great thing is in the environmental rating scale, the very first part is the introduction, and then there's instructions, and there's 4 pages of instructions. So they typically start on page 5. So if you are new to ecers, this instructions page on page 5 is going to be a really important place for you to start off, and you're going to need to read it quite a few times as you start to work through the scale and all of the indicators and items as well. So once again, as I went over last week when we were doing assessments and evaluations, this is very widely recognized within our field, childhood education and education in general, and that's why we're doing it as part of this class. I know some of you are new to the field or not in the field currently, so you have some time to work on this, and going to the Menifee Valley, going to the Menifee campus lab classroom is a great place for you to go and do this. This is a requirement of the class though, since it's within the TEDS department. It's really important that you fulfill the learning outcomes that we have for this class. So for some of you that are new to it, it's going to be a little bit daunting at first, but stick with it. Watch this video as many times as you need. Ask me any questions, and budget a bit more time for observation than you think that you're going to need, so that you can really take your time going through the scale and reading all of the indicators and the items as well. For some of us who have been doing it a longer time, it's quite easy. We're very familiar with it, but thinking back to my first time, it can be a little bit difficult. It is important that you have detailed objective observations within a setting, and that's why we have the environmental rating scale. And once again, for some of you that are new to this, you might want to take more detailed observations of interactions that you saw, activities or questions that you had, so that you could ask me later. So in the moment, if you have a question about what is the different types of books that we're looking for, because maybe you're unfamiliar with the types of books that we use in early childhood education, write a detailed note for yourself so that you can go ahead and ask me in an email, and I'm more than happy to help you guys. So once again, there are 7 indicators or items. It's space and furnishings, personal care routines, language and reasoning, activities, interactions, program structure, and then provisions for parents and staff. Within all of these items, though, within all of these indicators, there's also some items, so things like furnishings for relaxation and comfort, room arrangement for play. So there is quite a few parts to this scale. The biggest thing that you're going to do is you're going to print out this page that says score sheet. This is the score sheet. It looks like this. And when it's filled out, there's a sample in your booklet as well. And when it's filled out, it looks like this. You're going to have check marks and notes to yourself as well. So you're going to need to print this out or make copies out of the booklet that you have, because this is what you're going to use to do your observation. We do know that when children are using, when classrooms and programs that use the ecers consistently, we've found in some of our data and research that outcomes start to improve as well. So language ability improves, pre-academic skills such as math ability and reading readiness also improve. Attitudes towards childcare and perceptions of competence also change for families. Relationships and partners between teachers and families also improve, and so do the social and emotional skills of children, which is huge at this age. So it's a really important scale, and that's why we want to train you in the ways to use it, because once you get a handle on it, it's a really great rating scale that all teachers and all programs can use, regardless of type of program, philosophy, anything like that. And it helps with all the reasons that we talked about last week of why we should have assessment and evaluation. Some important outcomes that are not studied, but we feel anecdotally improve when you have strong programs that prioritize using rating scales, assessments, or evaluations is accident reports and accident rates are less. Health status improves. Self-help skills are also prioritized. There's generally more happiness in the early childhood education, or parents report more satisfaction. We see some increases in creativity, both in thinking ability, so cognitive thinking, and also in arts as well, because there's a focus in this on free play, which we know can contribute to creativity and creative thinking skills. Science and math knowledge and also social studies seems to improve as well, but we need to have some more research in these areas. So we're going to jump into the administration of the ecers. Once again, it can be the itters, the ecers, or the sackers, so it can be infant, toddler, early childhood, or it could be school age, depending on the program that you have. They're very, very similar in that it's a booklet, it has a score sheet, all the things that I need you to do for the paper are going to be the same. It's just the age group that you work with. There might be differences between what an infant can do and what a school ager can do, obviously, and so the rating scale speaks to that age group. The specific ecers is for about 2.5 to 5 years old. And once again, I would say, depending on your level of familiarity with the scale, you should budget at least 3 hours for the observation and for the rating. That's going to give you all of this rating scale that we've shown. This score sheet is going to be completely filled out. Because that's something you're going to turn in with the paper. So every single thing needs to have a check mark. You need to have decided what you're going to rate each item. So you need to give yourself about 3 hours. If you consistently do this with your work, you might need a little bit less. I can do it quite fast now because I've done over 100 of them. And then for some of you that are brand new, you might even need a little bit more than 3 hours as well if you're really taking your time and reading through it in the moment. All right, so this is an example of what the score sheet looks like. So what you're going to do is you're going to either make copies from this booklet, or you can also print it off. There's PDFs that you can find online, but you are going to need a copy of this. And so you are going to fill this out for all of the indicators, all of the items that we have. They should have check marks. You should circle the number that you believe you are rating this item. So 1 is not so great. Typically, I would consider it jail for kids. It's just kind of a place where kids are, and there's not a lot of great stuff going on. If you're consistently getting 1s and 2s in your rating scale, that shows that you have a lot of work to do as far as having really high quality. That doesn't mean that we're all getting 7s and 6s, but we consistently want to be in the 4, 5, 6, and then we want to have a bunch of 7s as well, because that shows that we're really, really quality as well. So you're going to decide in each of these indicators, and I'll go more into depth on this later in this. In indoor space, you're going to read through, for example, what does it say about indoor space? So if you were a 1, it would say insufficient space for children, adults, and furnishings. And this is on page 10, so you could read along if you wanted to. Space lacks adequate lighting, ventilation, temperature control, or sound-absorbing materials. The space is in poor repair. Peeling paint on walls and ceilings are rough. There's damaged floors. And the space is poorly maintained. It's sticky, it's dirty, there's trash cans overflowing. So if you put yes, 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 and yes, you could see why I kind of consider that jail for kids. That's not great condition. We wouldn't want kids tripping over loose floorboards or having lead paint chipping off walls, or really cold or really hot, or it smells like poop, or it's just way too loud, or there's so many children in a very small space. So you could see why we don't want a lot of 1s. So you would ideally be hitting no on all of these scales, and you wouldn't be hitting yes. Then you could go on to the next ones. Then you would go to 3. 3 is minimal. We don't really want 3s as well. And then 5s are good. So it would be like ample indoor space, good ventilation, space is accessible to children with adults and disabilities. And then 7 is excellent. That's what we're all shooting for at all times, is very, very high quality educational experiences for children. So it would be all of 3, all of 4, and then natural light can be controlled. There's ventilation that can be controlled. Windows can be open. There's a fan that can be used by staff. So we will go into this particular scoring, but I need all of these checked with either yes or no, depending on what you've observed. And then we will get into what number you're going to circle as far as how you're going to rate it. But this is the example of a score sheet that you're going to need to have at your observation. You're going to need to rate it in all items, and then you're going to upload it to Canvas for me so I can see that you completed it. All right, so when you are reading the ecers scale, it's very important that you read it carefully all of the time. So I just read you from the scale, so you can't really see that, but this is the indoor care one that I just read from. And you can see that it goes from 1 inadequate to 7 excellent, and this is in space and furnishings. So I want to read it all the way through. And then how I'm going to score it is if I observe these things happening or not. So it can't be on what's reported by the staff or what future plans are or when the grant money comes. It's what you see in that particular moment and not based on future plans. Always start reading from 1. So from that inadequate where I was talking about, like, this is not great, chipping paint, bad walls, all the way until you get to 7, excellent. And then in each one, you're going to rate yes or no, and that's going to play into how you score it overall. So ratings typically are assigned in the following way, and this, if you need this, all of these instructions that I have as far as the scoring system are also in the front part of it in the instructions for using the ecers, which are on page 5. So if you have your booklet with you in the observation, you have the instructions, and you can always go back to this if you need help in scoring. So you have to give a rating of 1, which is minimal, which is inadequate. I'm sorry, you have to give a rating for 1, which is inadequate, if any of the indicators scored yes. So if anything was marked as yes, if everything else was no, but 1 was yes, then you have to give it a 1. A rating of 2 is given if all the indicators under 1 are scored no, so that's great. We don't want to be inadequate. And at least half of the indicators under 3 were scored yes. And then a rating of 3 is given when all indicators under 1 are scored no, and all indicators under 3 are scored yes. So this is an example of it. So this is also gets into 4, 5, 6, and 7s. You can give non-applicable as well if it's permitted on the scale. Sometimes you are allowed to not have a specific part of this within a program, and you can put NA. But so this gives an example of how we would score. So we want all the ones to be no's. We don't want there to be, so furnishings for care, play, and learning. So we would say, so in indicator 1, which is right here, it says, insufficient basic furniture, and furniture is generally in poor repair. So we don't want to say yes to that. Those are bad things. We want them to be all no. So if all of your ones are no, that's great. Then you're at least going to get a 2 or a 3. So over here in 3, we can see that we want yeses. Yeses are things like sufficient play, furniture is sturdy, children with disabilities have adaptive furniture. So we can do yes, 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 and then one of them is allowed NA, so we don't really have to consider that one. And then we can see all of our 5s are yeses as well, so this is fantastic. We've already hit 6. We would have been able to hit 7 if it wasn't for this 7.3, which was probably like the woodworking bench or something like that. They didn't have that. And so because there was 1 no, we didn't get a 7. We had to go back down to a 6. So if you, all of these things like a rating of 4, under 3, everything that's right here on the right-hand side, once again, this is in the booklet that you should have about the rating scale. So if you have questions about how you're rating it, you can go back and you can read those instructions at any time. And then also you'll be filling out little additional questions that are in the scale, that in the profile that look like this. So child-sized, number of children, so it will be child-sized furniture, so child-sized tables, chairs, couches, anything that children can play on or sit on. So how many of them are child-sized pieces of furniture plus the number of children is going to give you the percentages of child-sized as well. And if you had questions on that, for each of the scales there is, so you'll have furniture for routine care and play, like I just said. And then on the next page, it'll have notes for clarification. So if you don't know what insufficient furniture is, you can read. It means basic furniture is furniture needed for routines, play, and learning listed in the notes for clarification. Then they'll go more into children's feet should be able to touch the floor. Children should not have to perch on the edge of a chair to touch the floor. They should be able to rest their elbows on the table and fit their knees comfortably. So we're trying to make sure that the chairs and anything that the children use for furnishing is for their side. They're not sitting on something huge or they're not sitting on something small. It's developmentally appropriate for their age. All right, so let's see if I can print this. All right, so this is a great example of scoring the early childhood environmental rating scale. This is from a regional training. Let me make sure that I can see. You know what? This is not going to play well for you guys. So what I'm going to say is that you should go online. This is on YouTube, totally free. It's called ecers 3 Scoring, narrated at 3.31. But as you can see, it's going to show you exactly how to rate everything. So if rating is stressing you out right now, don't worry about it. Watch this video, watch the rest of this lecture. There's more resources on Canvas. Read your booklet all over again, and then I think you should feel really, really prepared to go out and to do this. What we're noticing is that the areas where most programs continue to need support is within personal care routines and space and furnishings. So programs are more likely to get minimal and to get inadequate in both of those areas. And we're typically getting 4s and above on activities, interactions, program structures, or language and reasoning. So in most cases, space and furnishings and personal care routines are the parts of the scale that you're going to need to spend a little bit more time observing as well. That isn't to say that the place that you've chosen to observe at is going to be lower in that, but that might be an area that you might want to focus on as well. We also know that in school, this is schools that get a 1 being inadequate all the way to a 7. Most schools get 3s and 4s. I really push for us to be in the 5s and 6s. 4 is definitely good, 4 is fine, 3 is minimal. So we want to be at 4, 5s, and 6s because this is in the good range, heading towards excellent and not towards the minimal inadequate, which is 3, 2s, and 1s. So we do really, really want to have everybody doing the rating scale, and that's why we're having you write a whole paper and do an observation about this, is so that you can learn how to do this in your own programs, use it consistently, and so we can, as a field and as an industry, start getting into the 5, 6, and 7s, going from good to excellent. So what about your ecers scale? So you can use, once again, any rating scale. So it can be in the early childhood, the infant toddler, or the school age. I showed you the differences in what the books look like. They have different colors in the lecture from the previous week, which was evaluation and assessment. And last week, I also asked you to find a place to observe or call the lab school over at Menifee to find out their hours. You also need to have your student ID. And then I also asked you to get your rating book. What you need to do now before you actually go out and observe is you need to make a copy of the score sheet that I've already showed you, but it looks like this. This is the score sheet. I've showed you what it looks like multiple times. And once again, there's a sample on the previous page on page 74. And then you also need to make a copy of the ecers R profile. That looks like this. So on the last page of the booklet as well. It's on mine, it's page 13. So you need to have a copy of the score sheet and a copy of the profile, both in the back of the ecers booklet. If you're unfamiliar, once again, with this rating scale, you need more time to prep, and you're going to need to spend more time in the classroom. So you're going to probably watch this lecture a couple of times. You're going to watch that YouTube video. There's also discussion boards where I have tips, tricks, and hacks of doing the ecers. And you're probably going to need a bit of time in the classroom observing the interactions and also just the environmental space as well. We're really, really lucky that there's a lot of YouTube channel videos as well to help you with the finer points. But once again, there are notes of clarification within this booklet as well. So once you get to the Menifee lab classroom, or you get to the school that you're going to be observing at, you probably need about 2 to 3 hours, depending on your familiarity with the rating scale and what the program is doing. So nap would not be a great time to go because you're not going to be able to see interactions. You might want to call ahead to the school, or you're definitely going to want to call to the lab's classroom to find out the best time. And for the lab classroom, bring your student ID. And then you're going to need to read each scale very, very carefully and base scoring, once again, on only what you see and not what's going to happen in the future. So not what the staff tells you they're working on, what you actually observe on that day. Then you're also going to write observations as needed about what you saw. So within the scale, there's areas for you. If there's a rectangle for each area that you're going to score, and there's enough space for you to write observations. And because this is a paper that you're going to be writing about, if there's something that you want to remember that you want to write in your ratings in your paper, then you might want to make a note. If the scale is new to you, you're probably going to want to write more notes. And if the scale is new to you, you might also want to write down questions that you have that you can ask me. Check marks and tally marks are also possibly going to be needed in described as the scale. So a lot of times, such as in scales in number 16, it says encouraging children to communicate. And so we have communication activities, and there you need to give examples of when you hear communication activities during free play, during group time, and with written communications. And then for some of them, you'll also have tally marks. So how many times do you observe hand washing? So every time you see hand washing, you make a tally mark. And that was in number 13 and number 12 as well for toileting and diapering. So those are areas where you might need tally marks or check marks, or examples of the interactions that you see. So it's not just rating it a 1 through a 7, it's also taking observations and writing down the amount of time that you see that. That is why we like this score so much, is it's quite objective about what you see or what you don't see in a specific time in a classroom. All areas must be filled out for credit on this paper, and unless an NA is allowed, or if the program doesn't have like a sand and water table, you could rate them as a 1, something like that, and then tell me that the school doesn't have it. Or if a program doesn't have furnishings and relaxations, then a 1 score is going to be given, and you can write a note on your scale as well, telling me that the school didn't have like appropriate furnishings or something like that. You're not going to be graded down because the school was minimal or inadequate. Your score is based on how you rate it, and if you rate it correctly, then you will do really, really great. All right, so then you've done that. So you're gonna take this early childhood environmental rating scale. You're gonna take it home with you, and you are going to write a 3 to 4 page paper. It's totally up to you. Word count, I don't have a specific word count that I need, but most cases people are writing between a 3 and 5 page paper, and you need to use APA with a title page, an abstract, references at the end as needed. So you're gonna have an introduction. This is the rating scale and why it's used. So why do we have a rating scale? Why do we assess and evaluate programs? What's the point of doing it? And also let me know where you observed, how many students, how many teachers. So I don't need to know like teachers' names or kid names, like keep it fairly anonymous, but just generally how many students are in the program, how many students were in the classroom that day, how many teachers, general information that will give me some context when reading about the school. In the body, you're going to first describe your findings. So describe the strengths and vulnerabilities of the program. So did they score better? They got lots of 7s in one area, let's say personal care routines, but they got lots of 1s in interactions. So you could explain to me what this means, and if they scored low in those areas, why were they scored so low? So you're just generally describing the findings that you had from your observation. Then in the body, you're going to set goals for making improvements necessary to ensure a high quality environment. So you're going to pick things that are 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, whichever area that they were scoring low in, you're going to pick those areas and you're going to write at least 3 goals for the program and why these goals are necessary for creating high quality early childhood education program. And then for each goal, so you have 3 goals. So in this body right here, you're going to have at least 3 goals. And for each of those 3 goals, you're going to write 2 specific, measurable, and time-bound, that means by a certain date, objectives that would help the program achieve the goals. Doesn't mean that you're giving this back to the program. I mean, if you work there and they want to know what you thought, that would be great, but you don't have to go back and give the program this. You're just giving this to me. This is an academic collegiate paper where you are telling me, because you saw that they were scored low in certain areas, you're going to write 3 general goals, and each of those goals will have 2 specific measurable and time-bound objectives. So it could be something like books and pictures. So let's say they scored really low. They had some books accessible, but they weren't out all of the time. They weren't organized well. They weren't of high quality. They didn't show diversity. So I might say that my general goal is for books and language materials to be accessible at all times of day. I want them to be well organized. I want them to reflect diversity, have different languages, and be appropriate for the age group. And the program is going to have this by July of 2019. So that would be an example of, I want them to have high quality books, and then specific, measurable, and time bound. They're going to be in Spanish. They're going to reflect diversity. They're going to be accessible to the children all the time, and they will have this by July 19th. So that's an example of a goal and some objectives that you would write for the goals. You're going to have at least 3 of those. Then you'll have a conclusion where you wrap up the paper and describe the importance. So why, once again, is assessment and evaluation important? And you're going to wrap up what you observed as well. So to finish and to submit this, you're going to upload the paper, and you're also going to upload the completed score sheet and the completed profile to Canvas. So there'll be 3 sections. There'll be the paper, the score sheet that you used to score everything, and then the profile as well. So that is it for the ecers paper. Once again, you're going to spend some time, if you're unfamiliar, watching this lecture, seeing the video on YouTube that I just showed you that shows how to score, and then there's also tips, tricks, and hacks on Canvas. Please reach out if you have any questions as well, and it is due May 5th. Thanks so much, guys. I'll see you online.